Okay, awesome. Welcome to another episode of a podcast. Your host, Stephen Maxted, and we have a very energetic guest here today, Jessica Wylychenko. Hopefully, I did nail that with Speed and Savory. And Jess, you're definitely there's a few things going on outside of Speed and Savory. You're involved in a few things, and I think that as we were talking about before here, we'll dive into more of your full story here. But ultimately, we're going to talk about something that you're very passionate about from your end today, and I'm excited to dive into it. Have had a great time meeting through different walks of life, through Winnipeg being a big small town, and then kind of reconnected in the last couple of years here with some business ventures that you've been on, and been excited to have you on the podcast to chat a little bit more about that. So thanks for making time to be on here in your busy schedule. Pumped to have you on. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself from you?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. It's awesome to be on here. I love the content that you're putting out, and the folks that you interview always learn something from them. So great to be here. Yeah, you said it. There's a lot going on. So I like to, for sure, put myself into the category of an entrepreneur, a visionary, a hard worker. I like to bring kind of new realities, new visions into reality. And my most recent endeavor is kind of the relaunch of my nutrition practice, Speed and Savory. So I've been an entrepreneur or in business, started small business like 3 years ago, but came from a family, like a long line of entrepreneurs. My baba owned a grocery store. My mom and dad owned a restaurant in Interlake, Manitoba. So that's kind of how I got my start in entrepreneurship. And I'm a registered dietitian by profession, my background. So that's where the nutrition piece kind of linked in as well.
That is awesome. That seems very fitting. And I have seen some of your work before in the nutrition side, more in like a personal side at some dinners and stuff like that. I know it's something that you frequently discuss and bring up in a very positive way. What, and I guess like it's gone through some transitions without confusing the story too much here, but what kind of got you into this now, specifically with Speed and Savory, and what was the driving force there to kind of make that move?
Yeah, you're right. Nutrition has always been something that, I love food and nutrition. And I'm also a competitive runner. Well, I like to say competitive. It is on the competitive end of recreational, so half marathons, full marathons. And I find that the perfect intersection for me was where running meets nutrition and where that passion for food, passion for nutrition, and passion for running, it kind of all came together. I really fell in love with running, I would say, in the last 2 years. It became a really good mechanism for like coping with stress kind of initially. And then I just found other avenues of enjoying it along the way. And when I really got serious, and by serious, I mean trying to kind of beat my own best times, I realized that it was really hard. Like there's a lot of energy and focus that goes into performing from a running perspective, and nutrition is such a huge part of that. So when those two worlds met, it really clarified a lot for me from a performance perspective. And I just like also opened my eyes to how so many runners are under fueling. And I became so passionate, excited, and lit up about encouraging runners to fuel properly so they can hit their targets and feel really good and strong while they do it. I mean, you're an endurance sport yourself, be it running or cycling, so it definitely takes a toll on the body.
No, it definitely can. And it's so cool that we're jumping on this episode in this order. I've had a couple other folks jump on from different approaches with this. We had was he like Canadian weightlifting guy, Andrew. I think his episode dropped last week with us here, and we got to talk a little bit about this with him too. And so I just find this super fitting. But you're totally right. If you're not fueled up right, even from the last couple of days, I was just kind of shaking off a little bit of a injury, no details, but and I'm getting back on the bike again, and I realized how kind of like under fueled. You're right. Like I was feeling exhausted. And I went and dummied a bunch of carbs because I was feeling just like that leg. And I've been there before. in cycling specifically, where I go out for a long ride. And I think it's more common in cycling, because running, it's almost like crazy to just accidentally do another 20K, but it could happen, where I've added a few more on. But with cycling, you can kind of just keep pushing and you don't notice until the term comes up, being bonked, I think it is. Or I don't even know how to use the word, but you bonk.
You're right.
And then all of a sudden you get like kind of like lightheaded, and you're like, you don't bring enough snacks on your ride, which again just seems silly, but yeah, definitely relatable. It's been a topic within our cycling group for a bit about, how to train and how to make sure our diet is aligned with what we're doing for training. Because as much as you're trying to maybe cut or look a little more improved by putting that much time and energy into it, you just functioning during your day can be thrown off by not having enough nutrition. I've noticed that anyway. I don't know if that's everybody out there, but I've noticed that when I'm pushing it harder, you really got to throw a bunch of stuff in the tank to just kind of maintain function of your body, because you're burning so many calories doing
And
that.
a couple of things, like you're absolutely right, and what you were saying kind of flagged a couple of things for me. And first, we'll just tap on that injury
For sure.
piece, whether it's running or cyclists. But I'll just take some stats for runners. Basically, at any kind of one given time, and this was some stats that I heard on a recent podcast as well, you would find that at any one given time, 25% of runners on running teams are injured. So if you were to take a look at that, like, okay, so you're saying 25% or a quarter of your running team would be injured, or 1 in 4 runners. If that stat applied to like an NFL team or football, and saying like 25% of your players are benched and they're injured, like that just wouldn't fly, right? So why do we accept that level of injury in some of the endurance sports like running? And the reality is, like, we accept that level of injury because we typically push our bodies too hard, right? And we don't recover, but we want to keep going. So I think at the end of the day, it really boils down to what your goals are as an individual. If your goal is to hit a certain level of performance, then there's a lot of things you need to do, including rest, to hit that performance. If your goal is weight management, then you're going to be doing different things than if your goal is performance. So I'll often challenge people on clarifying what their goals are, right? If you're cycling recreationally, is it good for you to push yourself that extra 20K? Or is that part of your goals or not, right? So again, it's kind of like beginning with the end in mind. Like, what is your goal?
For sure. That's just like, I guess we'll call it what it is, but a little bit of the addictive tendency that comes along with it for me anyways.
Totally.
Whether it be running or biking, you kind of get addicted to chasing down that cardio and that rush. And then it's like, whoops, like I said, that is a real thing that has happened where I'm out for a bike and I'm like, I could just go a little further.
Because it feels so good in the moment, right? And it's that dopamine rush. Like,
totally.
A 30-minute high intensity workout will give you that hit of dopamine, but the more you get that and the more your body gets used to it, kind of the more you need to reach that threshold, right? So I think that's what they call runner's high. Obviously, cyclists have it too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that's, I don't know. Yeah, it's unique when you get that feeling. It's cool. I mean, that's great too, because you're usually in good enough shape to just like, either like double your distance or, like I said, add a few kilometers, whether it be 5 or 20, whatever it is. I know at different like lengths of distances though, I noticed that I can control certain things at different like levels. Like 30K is kind of like a great, almost like my perfect distance. I love doing 60 to 80 is I can feel a little bit of a lag, but then like after that, that's when things could get shaky if you don't have the right nutrition on your side on that end of things. Do you see tendencies like that on the running side where there's like different distances? I'm sure you feel differently, but do you have different like benchmarks for your training, or when you notice like, hey, I need to like push, like get this to the next level?
Yeah, you have to be very body aware for sure. And I think most athletes and runners, cyclists, we are. And something I always like to remind myself and my clients too is like, what's actual isn't optimal. So what you can actually do, where you can actually push, doesn't mean that it's best or optimal for your training. So I'll give you an example, right? I have a running coach myself that puts together my running training plans. And
Cool.
3 days out of a 6-day marathon running schedule are considered easy runs.
Yeah, I saw that on your post the other day.
Yeah.
You outlined that. Sorry to call that
And
out
they're
right there,
like,
but I was
no,
just
but
like,
that's exactly right, right? It's like
yeah.
half of your training schedule are easy runs. So maybe they're long, like they might be an hour, right?
Right.
But that is part of the plan. So could I go out and actually push at a faster pace on every one of those easy runs? For sure. But is it
Right.
optimal for your training adaptation? And the answer is no, right? That's why you
Yeah.
have kind of the cycling of training. And the same thing for nutrition, right? You can
Totally.
get away with a lot less fuel and a lot
Right.
more fuel, but is it optimal?
Right.
So I think it
Very
really just
interesting.
depends on how you want to frame it and how
Yeah.
kind of how committed you are to the goal. But just sharing a little bit of like my running journey, I was starting to get more competitive into running maybe about 4 years ago, and I underfueled. Unintentionally was underfueling because you go from like health conscious, dietitian mindset, eating balance, and now all of a sudden you're training for a half marathon, but you
Yeah.
don't change the way you eat. And
Right.
for female runners, especially if you're in a low state of energy for even a short window, like 3 or 4 days, that can start to do damage to your body hormonally. And
Hmm.
now extend that over a full training season, you can really be undernourished. Whether it's
Yeah.
intentional or unintentional, it still happens, right?
Right.
So it took me a while, despite my professional background, to see
Right.
where those two worlds meet, where health and performance intersect, and then how you kind of navigate that. So that's what I do now is I help people navigate kind of the complexities that comes along with nutrition and endurance sport.
That is very interesting. And like, I guess it is definitely a thing too when you're in the space of being like competitive in there. Those as folks are going, it becomes more important. But I think at any stage of getting into fitness, the nutrition thing for me, and maybe I don't know, we're calling like just getting in your 30s, you start to think about it a lot more, right? But then all of a sudden it becomes like a major priority in your day, and like considering what you're putting in your body to fuel it to get to that level and not feel bad
Yeah,
from the
not
side of
feel
like pushing
bad
yourself.
and
Yeah,
not get injured and
yeah,
And
injury
that's the thing,
avoidance.
but sometimes injuries are a wake up call. Like they
Yeah,
suck, right? I've had kind of two significant injuries. You mentioned that you had one, and they definitely are, a mental block. Like they kind of drain your spirit a little bit. They drain
oh
your
yes,
energy, right? And we
yeah,
just want to get back to doing what we're doing. But we can learn so much in that stage of injury. Like not just what do I do to prevent this in the future? But mentally, we can learn so much of how
yeah.
to really overcome our attachments that we have to the sports that we do.
I literally have a plan, like a backup plan in case something happens for my
Okay.
mental state to like be like, hey, like, okay, if something happens here, because I've had like crazier injuries where it's like taken me out for like quite a bit of time and didn't really have that ever like cross my mind. I don't know if you ever think like this. This might be a very unique thing, but I just know that I'll invest more time into things like silly little things to distract me, but like Duolingo, learning different languages that I kind of have on the go, but it's not like a major priority for me right now. But if things were to shift in terms of like time or just to distract myself, that's what I would, one of the things I would shift more time investment into, because I know
Yeah.
how hard it can be to get through that state of like, hey, I can't go out and do the thing that I love every day for the training side, whether it be, lifting weights or going out and chasing, that cardio bug down. So it's like just a small thing without getting into too far into detail there. But
It's a smart strategy. You're
yeah,
nurturing other likes and interests that you have, right? And
yeah,
that's an important thing to do because I think so often I know for myself and for a lot of the runners that I work with, we are so strongly attached to the identity of being a
oh yeah,
runner or
yeah,
being a cyclist. So now, if you throw an injury in there and maybe you're not running every day or you're off running for weeks to heal for your injury, you feel very lost because that identity has been gone. And it takes a lot of, again, like mental work, self work to kind of dissociate yourself from that identity and realize that you are a holistic person. You have a lot of other kind of elements going for you at any one given time. And if you know that rest is what you need to get back on your feet, then you should take it.
This might be such a strange plug for our discussion today, but I'm going to go there because not only did this come like from my learning about like rest and stuff like that, but having like a kind of a plan in place was like major injuries before, where I was like didn't really know where to go with that because of that identity, but also kind of relating into entrepreneurship when I had a really strong identity for a period of time with different jobs. The first time it happened to me was a really big shift where a corporate ag company I worked for went through a merger. I thought I'd already like kind of got past the stage of like firings or let go, whatever you want to call it. I got fired, but like let go, you get a package and stuff through the deal. And then that happened to me, and I didn't have a plan past that. I was like, oh, I'll be here for like 30 years. I love this company. I kind of grew with them through university and stuff, but just a numbers thing. Younger, at that time, the single guy on the team, it would make a lot more sense now looking back on it that I was the one to get let go from the team. Everyone else had families. I'm sure that would have been very detrimental for someone else. So regardless of sales numbers and keeping everyone, cohesive within the team, that made a lot of sense at the time. It was crushing. So if that ever happened again, I realized instead of rushing to go get another job right away, because it turns out there's a few of them out there in the space that I was in, I promised myself I'd go travel, and it did happen again. And the next time through a merger style thing, I booked a trip like the next day. It didn't really bother me as much. And it's not to say I didn't care about the job. It was just less of my identity was like so strongly tied to something out of my control in many ways. And anyway, so that's my short story on that.
That's a good connection. No, that's the exact
weird though, right?
type of way great to make that connection. It's just those strong key identities that we tie ourselves to, right? And what happens when it's taken away? What do you do, right? And I think it's smart to have strategies to kind of invest in several different parts of your life.
Because what if?
Yeah, what if? And like,
and you're running.
There's always a what if, right?
Yeah. Well, especially if you go through like a major injury, that's something where you can't come back from. I've actually because I'm knock on wood, hopefully nothing happens. But like, what would I do if there, was an injury? Like, again, I think that's just like an age thing. Wouldn't have thought about this in my 20s at all. But I'm like, what would you do with your time if, something were to like drastically change, physically for you? What would you get busy with? And there's so many other sports out there. I know I've talked with some folks about this, and one of the folks, within my marketing team, plays another sport that involves him being an insurance stuff like that. It's super interesting to learn about other walks of life doing that. But anyways, that's a tangent for me.
I mean, when it comes to injuries, like I work with injured runners all the time, and the goal is always focusing on what you can do, right?
Totally.
So don't focus on what you're not doing, but just focus on what you can do. And 5 years ago, I broke my leg from a stress fracture in running. So I was off running for 6 weeks, and I just came off of a really hot running season. I had big goals. And from a combination of nutrition and biomechanics and overtraining, I landed up with a stress fracture. And I still remember that moment when the sport med doc was like, yeah, you can't run for 6 weeks and we're going to put a cast on you. So that's devastating, right? And if you focus on all the things you can't do, you won't get out of that stronger. Right. So it just became mobility work, strengthening upper body. Like I lived in a condo at the time, so I was crutching up and down the hallway. And that time was really valuable because it allowed me to put together a nutrition plan for myself to get through kind of that healing phase. So it's always about focusing on what you can do with what you have versus it's like the have not kind of thought process, right?
Yeah, totally. Jeez.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things, like from a nutrition standpoint too, when you're injured, you're used to putting out so much energy in your sport, right, in the day. And whether you have a nutrition strategy or not, you know that there's a certain volume of food you're going to eat where you think you're going to feel okay. A lot of runners will restrict their intake when they get injured because they're not moving as much. And
Yeah.
that kind of calorie restriction and that fear associated with body composition change and image change, it fuels the under fueling and your recovery goes down, right? Your healing,
Right.
recovery. So, yeah, it's always a little bit of a hurdle to get over, but you still need to fuel your body for recovery too.
Absolutely. What do you see when you just mentioned you're working with some folks that are injured? What's something that you see them cut back on in terms of fueling, but they really should be keeping in their diet?
Yeah. Two things kind of jump to mind right away. It's a good question. First of all, it's just straight up like volume, right? How
Right.
much they're eating and when. They'll just reduce volume all the way around. And then carbs get the chopping block,
Cut.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they get cut.
That's what I was
And
thinking for sure.
it's almost like a reflex that people just cut
Yeah.
carbs, right? Because
Yep.
there's so much in the diet culture and media that make carbs seem like the enemy. But really, you need a certain amount of carbohydrate to get protein actually into your tissues to promote
Right.
healing and repair, which it's intended to do. So
Yeah.
it fuels so much of your body's energy system. And even, well, that's just the injury side of things, right? So the volume goes down and the carbs go out the window.
Right. And what and I guess between it, like what should people be worried about the carb side? I know you just mentioned it's important, but like should they be a little cognizant of how much they are putting in still, or is it like, you know, you should still keep it part of the diet for most of the potential injury time, I guess, as it were, because that's actually instinctually one of the first things that I would do too. And I
Yeah,
probably have, and it probably wasn't good, but then I find my body almost like talks to me more. That might seem like a weird thing to say, where I like, no, I need to, as I admittedly said before here, I just like dummied a lot of bread literally yesterday because I was feeling like just like non-energetic, and very fitting for the timing of this, not planned, but I just like literally had bread and a bunch of stuff with dinner last night, and I couldn't feel better as like last night and today would go as training continued. But I guess I've been limiting myself, focusing more on protein, and yeah, just a little bit of a diet thing I'm testing out there, but definitely felt way better throwing that back in there.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's good, right? You're kind of listening to your body and being intentional with it. And I think for a lot of us, it depends. You are the expert in your own life, regardless of what any
Right.
dietitian or coach says. You have to take that information and challenge it or go with it and find a plan that works for you. So it really depends kind of how you feel and how you respond. And if you can trust your body's internal cues when it
Right.
tells you you're hungry or full, right? So tapping into that intuitive eating. But the reality is
Yeah.
let's just take your current state of eating, or let's take a runner's kind of typical runner's calorie distribution.
Sure.
It's going to be more weighted from carbohydrate. If you're fueling for performance, you're going to be pushing that 60% of your calories are coming from carbohydrate. Now, when you
Very
switch
interesting.
to a focus on recovery, maybe that 60% is going to go down to 50, but it's still there, right? So it's
Right.
not that it plummets to like a negative and we're in a low range of carbohydrate. It's
Right.
just adapting down and favoring other nutrients. So it's all still in balance, right? We're always still looking at that protein, carb, and then, of course, a lot of micronutrients, so like vegetables and different fiber sources. It just
Yeah.
shifts balance a little bit based on what your goals are. So you're right to
Interesting.
favor protein in a recovery phase. Protein would go up as that
Okay.
carbohydrate kind of levels off
Right.
versus the endurance phase and the training phase where you'd have a higher percent carbohydrate.
Interesting. Okay. Maybe I was oversharing it here. I was trying to stick to the stuff off of like listening online to less ingredient list stuff basically for the last like month while recovering. So trying to just go right for like meat, veggies, anything like one ingredient style eating as much as I could, and then limiting a little bit of carbs, I guess, on my end of things there. But that's just like a personal hack and sharing kind of like while we're online here. But the carb thing definitely, yeah, got pulled back. But it's great to hear that, because I'm sure other people, I can't be the only person going out there and doing it. Like you said, very common to do there. But outside of that, and I guess you're more focused on strictly for like dietitian stuff related to performance based within athletes. Is that correct, or is it kind of helping most folks? Or that's the niche that you're going for in
Yeah,
general?
I mean, it's a broad spectrum for sure of clients that I've worked with in the past, all the way from,
Yeah,
improving their current lifestyle, getting active, staying active. But my focus is definitely on the runner,
cool.
and specifically on that runner who, is pushing their own personal limits, whether they're pushing the pace, they're,
Right,
going from a half marathon to a full marathon to an ultra. The nutrition strategy changes. And that's where I like to help them, right? Hone in on that strategy and really elevate their play, because we'll put in hours. We'll run for hours and hours a week, right? Six
right,
hours a week, 10 hours a week, 60 plus miles a week, and be so committed to that. But when we're not seeing the gains and we're
yeah,
getting injured while we're doing it, like,
right,
that's so frustrating. And oftentimes nutrition is that piece that's missing, because everybody eats. Like,
right.
we all wake up.
Yep,
Some people are doing fasting, and we could maybe talk about that in a bit. But for the most
sure.
part, everybody just eats, and we hope for the best, right?
Yep,
Kind of doing this, kind of doing that. I heard a bit about this. I got some information on that. But the actual details of what you need to match up and align with your training, you don't have that. It's a shot in the dark, right, at the end of the
yeah,
day. And I laugh about
definitely.
this all the time, because as like runners, we're just obsessed with shoes, right? Like, I'll get any pair of running shoes. I need the newest, like, New Balance.
Right,
I need the carbon plate, like all the things. Easily spend 200, 300 plus dollars on a pair of shoes. But the value that you would get out of 1 month of nutrition coaching for a pair of shoes will last you your
interesting.
entire
Right,
running season and beyond. So it's
totally.
just that value equation, right? I think we just take for granted that we eat every day, so I don't need a coach to tell me how to do it. But
Right,
what you're trying to do with your body, run an ultra, run a full, push the pace, that's not normal,
right.
right? That's
You can't just
beyond.
eat normal within that space.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
very
I may be
interesting.
downplaying it too, Steve. Like, a lot of people, maybe
Yeah,
they are feeling really great with their current plan, but the folks that come to me, they recognize that there's more here that they could do.
absolutely. Well, I think it's something that you mentioned too, that you have a running coach specifically for the running aspect, like of your training, right? And I talked about this like a little bit more, and it really puts it in a perspective. Is like the folks. It would be crazy if someone went to the Olympics. I mean, it's kind of applicable for this in this case, but like in terms of like someone trying to push their boundaries and stuff, it'd be crazy for someone to go to the Olympics and not have a coach or have like all this extra help and stuff. Yet the I'll call it the average person training for something like this or in other sports just assumes, I think in many cases, to what you were saying there, is like that they can kind of go with the flow and still perform at this level. And they often maybe wonder why they're not able to get to that better time or
Yeah.
feel
Or
good
they're
while
still
doing it.
getting injured, right?
Yeah. And that's not normal. But if you seek that extra help, I started doing that this year in different parts of my business, whether it be in reading different literature, like for self-teaching, so to say, or signing up for courses is something I've personally been doing. And I think kind of hit home the point for a listener here is to really inquire about and hire professionals to help you get to that space. It'll probably be one of the best investments you do with your time and resources, because you leave thinking a lot differently. You're not able to have the same capacity. I mean, we've been out of school where, or wherever, wherever you took different training for sports and stuff too, at different levels, you had coaches coach you and teach you along the way,
Yeah.
and maybe even had some form of nutritional coaching or guidance along that journey too. And things change over time with your body or recommendations through other um, research that comes out. I guess this kind of goes to maybe a good question to ask, but what's the number one it might be a tricky thing. We can even do top three if this is if it ends up being easier. So I'm not putting you on the spot here, but if there was a number one thing that you would say to a runner trying to get in there, understanding they're also all individual, in this case as a precursor, but number one thing that you'd recommend that they kind of look to improve upon in their diet, or like I said, if there's a three, we can make a list. But is there one thing in particular that you see all the time that you're like, hey, this is something that is an obvious thing that to be discussed more, but that they should seriously consider?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of alarm bells going off as you're saying that. So
Yeah.
first of all, like before we even look at what and how much someone's eating, it's when they're eating, when they're fueling,
cool.
as far as time of day and
Yeah.
fuel around their key workouts. Right. So that's the first piece is and the why we do that is because getting enough energy and fuel in prior to a key workout will help you meet the threshold of that workout, right? Actually complete it successfully,
Right.
and then help you recover from it. So that's the first thing I would look at is, when are you typically working out within your day? Like when are you doing your run? And how do we adjust your fueling to match and optimize that part of your training?
Cool.
So I would say that's the first thing that a lot of us struggle with, because maybe you run 5 o'clock in the morning, maybe you run on the way home from work and you're stopping at the gym. Maybe you're doing it on your lunch break. So we kind of need to align all of the timing of that to best support you. And then the second piece is sheer volume of food. Most runners, especially my female clients, come to me and they're underfueling. So it's addressing kind of the not eating enough piece. And then I would say the third part of it, so we'd have the timing, kind of the volume, and then I would say the tweaking, right? Like let's find the actual amounts that are working for you before your long runs or the fuel that you need on your long runs. And a lot of runners will come to me and say, okay, I need to know how to fuel my long run. Like, do I take gels? Do I take hydrators? Do I take dried fruit? But meanwhile, their entire day of eating and fueling needs to be where we start. Like, why are we talking about fueling for the 2 hours that you run? What about the rest of the day that you're eating? So I always try to pull them back and say, well, let's build that foundation because it's going to have immediate gains for you. Like if you start eating this before your run, like you will feel it during that run. And as soon as you start to feel the benefits of what you're doing, like you want to keep doing it, right? If you want more, you're like, oh, this is working. So I'll always start with that foundation before the tweaking begins.
Very awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I wasn't sure if that was putting on your spot. I don't really have any rules on this one, but it's a good start because regardless of you sharing that, they're still going to have to like go out and do it the same way that I guess is like open and joke with this, but I've seen personal trainers like talk about this. Even if they shared all the secrets to get abs online, they would still need people to be held accountable to go get them because it seems to be very, we'll call it like easy in theory, and that might be hitting on a string, but it was a funny thing to joke about because we all kind of know, I think, in general, pursue fitness. Some of that probably comes with nutrition, but the amount of like sharing that out there, people still need to want to do it.
Exactly. You need to want to do it for sure. And also what the part of the coaching element that I like is that ongoing support. Like, let's just say you had something that throws a curveball in your regular schedule and you don't know how to adapt it. Right.
Okay, I would literally wrote that down because I was like, hey, how about time insert or add to this? But like, what if you have like a meeting the hour before your lunch run and you're supposed to probably, maybe load up before then? I don't know that. Maybe you're supposed to eat after, whatever the case is. But work gets in the way for a lot of folks in that one. And it's tough to manage that. So sorry, keep going with that.
No, you're right. It's how to, that's where the coach part comes in. Anyone could go kind of online and find a plan. And even I make just nutrition plans for people if they want to take them and follow them. But the coaching element is the part that makes it workable and livable for your life. So I'll typically, text or email with my clients at the start of the week And at the end of the week, and just say, hey, do you have any days this week that you think are going to be a challenge for you to actually meet your targets? What's going on this weekend? What hurdles do you see? And then it's that ongoing back and forth that will actually give them the details to kind of continue their plan into their lifestyle, because the perfect plan is not perfect unless it's working for you.
Totally. So. That resonates very, very much in the daily routine there. Sometimes it is tough to balance those things. I know I'm not alone in that, and it is a struggle. It's never going to be perfect either. I'm sure that's part of the conversation you have with folks. I mean, yes, this would be ideal, but you have a life outside of running and bringing that full circle for folks doing other things, right? Whether it be raising a family, running a pretty serious job, training, that's not always going to align for you within that process.
And that's something that's so, it's when you look at everything in a bigger picture, and you take a lot of clients and endurance athletes, recreational runners, like we're living a regular life, right? We're not paid to do this in any capacity, like paid to train. So you're balancing your family, you're juggling getting a meal on the table at the end of the day, you're going to work, you're running between sports. So how do you make it work and make it all fit, right? When you're kind of juggling that entire lifestyle. So I think that's the key component. And a lot of people will undervalue the effort that they're putting in. Well, I'm only running, a 50K, but I'm doing it really slow. So, it doesn't really make a difference. Like, I don't really need.
Right.
Crazy. Like, you're running at 50K, people undervalue the time and effort they're putting into these endeavors and how proud they should be of themselves. So they might think they don't need a running coach or a nutrition coach or a really good physio or a good massage, but it's not normal for the human body to do a lot of those things. And you need that support and give yourself permission to get that support too.
Totally. Yeah. It's not just you running. That becomes one of the biggest things. And you're right. There's almost like a whole team that you have to create on your own. We'll compare it to the Olympic athlete that likely has access to all that stuff. Right? You got to create a small version of what they probably have around their own ecosystem that's provided them because they're getting paid to do it.
Yeah, and it takes a long time to create that community, right? Yeah. Of supports and coaches and trusted professionals that can help you kind of bring it together. And you may not need them all at once, but you'll find a time that you do. And I've certainly tapped into my network of trusted advisors in the fitness space. And I'd be the first to admit that I utilize all of their kind of professional services to get me where I've been from an endurance running perspective. So
yeah, absolutely. Can we talk about some of your goals for a sec? Personally, because I know you have some pretty rocking times on here. I won't be distracted by looking at my phone. We were talking about before, and I mean it's awesome. And I've heard some of the times that you mentioned first kind of knowing you, and you casually dropped that you ran like a 10K in like 30 something minutes, and I was like, what? Like that's crazy. But what are some of your goals, and what are some like of the highlights for your PR side of things to kind of showcase you've spent a lot of time on yourself, and now you're sharing that with other people and helping them get to that, their goals. They won't be the same as yours, but what does that look like for your like PRs, and are you trying to break those this year? Or do you know those off the top of your head, or do you want me to pull them up on here? Do you have them memorized?
Yeah, I know I don't have them memorized, but
I'll pull them up. The full we had at 2:59:21, the half 1:25:48, 10K 37:26. I don't know if those are PRs, but they probably are. Maybe.
Yeah, they are. They are, okay, and they were all from last year, 2023.
Wow. Damn.
So I really equate that to, it's a high level of intention. I'll say that much for sure. But also a lot of things aligned. I was able to kind of look at running very holistically and my nutrition very holistically, and those goals were, I didn't have those goals like to hit PRs last year. I just had goal events, and the output happened to be a PR.
Very
So I
cool.
really put an effort last year on um, fueling more intentionally for training for a full marathon. That was kind of my second year of training for a full marathon. This is my third. And the first year, I didn't scale up from my half marathon to full marathon in my fueling strategies. Last year, I did.
Very
And
awesome.
I focused on fueling throughout the entire season. And it really made a difference on the injury side of things. I was able to push through all of the training runs, recover stronger in between, and just had a lot of fun while doing it. So I guess
Awesome.
looking at this year, of course, everyone, has their goals, and I would say it would be awesome if I could top any of those times. I do have a couple of key races. I'm running the Vancouver Marathon in May,
Awesome.
and then looking at, of course, the Manitoba Marathon, and then Chicago in the fall. So if I could
Very cool.
replicate or beat any of those times, I will be very happy with that.
Yeah.
But mostly just getting through it strong and uninjured.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's ultimately something too that I think goes through a lot of endurance athletes' mind. I mean, for me with tries, it's like just like taking each section at a time. Get through the swim, get out of the water,
Yeah,
get on the bike. Hopefully, no tires pop. And you have a successful part there. By the time we get to the run on that part of it, you're just like, okay, just get to the finish line, regardless of how you're doing in that time frame. Those are things that creep into my mind. Same thing has happened when I've done longer runs, not at your level, but you're just like, hey, let's get started. Like let's get to that 5K.
yeah,
Okay, now we're at 7.5. If we're doing like a 10K run, that's one of my preferred distances for like both on the tail end of the try and otherwise. And then it's like, hey, let's finish strong for that last 2.5, because you never know. I mean, there's lots of factors, like you said, around injuries, and hopefully that they don't happen, prior to or during the race. Hopefully they don't happen at all. But if they're going to happen, hopefully not around that time frame, right? Within the circuit of training and stuff. So it's always kind of like, I think people's anxiety around racing is due to unforeseen circumstances. And
and I mean, we need to celebrate like getting to the start line of any
yeah,
race, because
totally.
that's the journey, right? Is getting to the start line, and when you finish, like, of course, it's amazing, but to get to the start line prepped and ready to do your thing how you intended to do is just such a, I think, an under celebrated um, piece of the journey for a lot of us, right? Because at the end of the day, like, we have to celebrate what our bodies are doing, kind of regardless of the time that you're doing it in. It's a huge endeavor, both mentally, physically, emotionally, and we just need to celebrate it more.
No, totally agree with you. That is like a big part of that journey, is like getting there, is showing up. Uh, I'll try to relate this directly to running, but I mean, on the try side of things, is showing up to pool early, working within the schedule that you can get into the tank to do that. Like you said, fueling, or, making that investment every day in yourself, and including the rest stuff in that mix too. It's hard, but it's important. For sure on that side of things. And I guess maybe kind of nearing in the end here, on the rest side of things, and I know that you're more focused on like diet, but do you take into consideration people's like running training schedules as well when you're looking at their diet, or recommending different patterns within that? And what does that look like for folks?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Good question. So always, right? I'll always ask as part of the intake process, like, what is your current training plan?
Cool.
Because there are often key workouts within that training plan where, the day before we need to manipulate some of the nutrition, like they might need to increase their carbohydrates the day before a long run. Primarily,
Okay.
that's the biggest one. Or
Yeah.
let's talk about race day nutrition. What do you eat the day
Right.
before your race? There's always changes there. So, the carbs are going up, the protein and fat is coming down, the fiber is coming down to help with digestion so that we're just getting straight energy and glycogen stores that day before your run. So
Cool.
we'll always look at the full training plan and then have like a pre-race nutrition plan that's just going to get you kind of like a horse coming out of the gates, right? So that you're just ready
Totally. Yeah.
to go and you're ready to like burn through all those extra. I'd like to give you an example of
Yeah.
what a change might look like. Like I work a lot in the macronutrient space, right? Calculating calories with specific protein, carb, and fat targets. Like
Hmm.
for a long run, you may need an extra, 5 servings of carbohydrate that day, right? An extra
Okay.
200 plus grams of carbohydrate the day before a long run.
Yeah.
And a lot of people naturally wouldn't do that. So to have a plan and someone giving you the permission to eat that much, um, in the in the spirit of performance, is really great. And then you just see how your body can. You're like, wow, I can't believe I just did that. Like I felt good. I finished strong, and that's
Right.
what you want to see, right? That's when you get really excited for your clients because you know it's making a difference for them.
Totally. And I'm sure that is very rewarding in terms of getting feedback like that. And kind of a funny one maybe for you too. What is, or I don't know, however, however this unfolds, what's your favorite carb to recommend for folks? Or is there a specific one that you like lean towards or for your own training? Do you
Oh,
have a favorite?
always. Yeah, this is a good question. Bagels, obviously.
Okay, good. I was
Yeah,
thinking
I
it might
could
lean that
really
way.
enjoy bagels. I do like bread for sure, right? Any type of bread or baked good, and I think it's important that yeah, you have to enjoy how you're fueling, and the choices that you're making, and just get a variety of things, right? Like
Right.
try to
Yeah.
kind of eat a variety of different sources, but you always have to enjoy it. And I remember like in back in the day of kind of my early training and running, like maybe eating like half a bagel with breakfast or like half a banana, and now it's like two a day or right. So you kind of remove that fear
Right.
of food in the spirit of performance and fueling.
I think that's very encouraging to hear you talk about it like this, because I think a lot of people are afraid, myself included, in some of the training before, where for a while it's just like bonking. I remember it was a few years ago. I'm just going to tries and really pushing the limit on the amount of time that we were spending training with the guys that I do that with, and just kind of hit a period of realizing I just need to put. I didn't get specific help. We should probably talk after this about that side of things, but I just ended up putting way more stuff on my body, and I've just felt like that relief. Like almost I felt kind of yesterday coming into today. I kind of forgot that I was doing that to myself unintentionally again. But I think it's such a common thing that people are under fueling or incorrectly fueling for something that they saw either online, or had advice given from someone else where that works for them, but it might not work for you. In that example, right? Because everyone has different goals, and with speaking with someone like yourself and getting that one-on-one attention to figure out what's going to work best for your schedule, I think is just a heightened importance to really consider that for any kind of training if you're taking it seriously or downplaying it. Like you said, it's not going to hurt you from knowing more about what
No,
to
you owe
do.
it to yourself, right? It's a gift to yourself. Because a
Yeah,
lot of us too, we don't just want to do this for a year or a couple
totally.
years. Like if you want to stay running, you want to stay cycling, how do you
Yeah,
keep your body, in good enough condition to think about the longer term, right? You can't just
totally.
break it all down now. You have to maintain it as well.
Yep, absolutely. And what just as we're getting to kind of near the end here, what's the best way to find you online for your services and stuff? I know we have Speed and Savory in the caption here, and we'll include it in the posts as well. But what's the list of the social medias there folks can track you down, or what do you prefer people to contact you
Yeah,
through?
so directly through Instagram at Speed and Savory or my website, so speedandsavory.com. You can link on there, and check out all the different services or just contact me directly. And yeah, that's the quickest way to do it.
Cool. That was easy. And is there any events, I guess, like you mentioned a few races for yourself specifically? I guess maybe this wouldn't totally apply to this, but are you going to any kind of like events or um, I don't know if like trade shows would apply for this service that you're doing, or how are you finding folks to connect with in the industry? Anything like that coming up, or a little bit different
Yeah.
with the service side?
Yeah, so it's definitely like a direct, I would say direct to client service, but I'm
Yeah.
always looking at engaging with different running groups or training groups within the city because
Cool.
nutrition is always a question, right? So I'll often
Yeah.
find myself speaking at different speaking events and that kind of thing, but no race expos planned yet. If I could fit it into the schedule, I probably will though.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we'll stay tuned, and hopefully people do follow you based off of here and come check you out for some advice. And it's been great having you on. So
Thanks,
thanks
and
so
we'll
much
get you
for,
on a nutrition plan for your try, right?
yeah, we have to. After hearing this, sounds like it's something we really need to explore for sure.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. See ya.